What we want to do is we have a function here, and we want to find the vertical asymptotes, horizontal asymptotes, and graph it. In order to graph it, I'm going to include the x and y intercepts. Well, the vertical asymptotes are when the denominator equals 0. So solving that, we get x equals 1 as our vertical asymptote. And that means that's a point that our equation will never cross. Now, horizontal asymptotes are when the numerator over the denominator, highest power, when the powers are the same, the 4x and the x, the powers on the leading coefficient are the same, we can reduce it to get the coefficients in front, and so y equals 4 is the coefficients in front. Now what that means, you can actually cross a horizontal asymptote. That just means that out towards the ends of our graph, that's what our graph will approach, is those, but it may cross it at points in between. Now to get some x-intercepts or some starting points, I can get the x-intercepts by setting the numerator equal to 0. And so adding 2 and dividing by 4 gives me x equals 2/4 or 1/2. So that means I have a point right here at x equals 1/2. And just to get a little height on here, I could do the y-intercept. The y-intercept is when x is 0, which would leave me a -2 on top and a -1 on the bottom, which is a 2, which means my graph's going to cut through this point here. Now what I need to do is figure out how to graph this. Well, the only place that my graph can change from positive to negative is at the x-intercept. Since that only occurred once, it's not repeated. That means I'll cross my graph here. And then when I get to the vertical asymptote, it again was not repeated. It only appeared once. It wasn't x minus 1 squared. And therefore, because it repeated once, we'll switch to the opposite side. If we went down on one side, we'd have to approach the asymptote going up, or the opposite way on the other side. So from here, it looks like I know I need to connect these 2 points. So it looks like I'm going to approach my asymptote up above, from down below, the horizontal asymptote going out to the left. And then from there, I can see that I have to cross this point. Therefore, I must go down to approach this asymptote going down. But since I'm approaching the vertical asymptote going down, that means from the other direction, I'll have to approach it going up, because I have to go the opposite direction, because the vertical asymptote was not repeated. So it's an odd point, or an odd asymptote, so I have to approach it in the opposite direction. And so then going out to the right here, I would begin to approach my horizontal asymptote as well. There are no other points for which I should cross the axis or anything else. And so that would be the graph of this particular equation.